Welcome, everyone. Time to talk about a fascinating area of misinterpretation as usual. It's time to come into my secret room of knowledge. Welcome, everyone. I'm going to talk about something that we all know about, and as most things in life, we live on what is a urban myth of understanding about it. So much of this is, so much of life is an urban myth, and we really need to dispel these myths and get to the truth of so many things that keeps us in a delusional way of thinking and operating while believing the lies of others that are perpetrated for very particular reasons. And I will unmask those reasons right now. We're going to cover Dracula, the story that we all know. We all know the movies. Many have been produced for many, many years. There's lots of movies that have just disappeared about Dracula, which are excellent ones, performed by, of all people, Carradine and others, that have been a part of entertainment world for almost 100 years now, in terms of our common radio and movies. It actually goes back much further than that. But the classic novel, and it is a novel, and people need to understand that, and we also have to understand that where people's research come from in general, but Bram Stoker, the Irish author, and he was Irish, he's not English, wrote this story which captured the imagination of the public at that time and continues. And so many stories are based on that. And we've got to remember, based is a good way of understanding. Just as Bram Stoker wrote the novel, a fictionalized account of, really nothing more than a novel. I don't think that anything was supposed to be meant seriously by it. He did some research to base it on the gossip, the bad history that he understood from his bad education, getting information from what are bad sources that he accessed. The German sources where this follow-up history came from, that, of course, there are reasons why this information is bad, and I'll get into that as well. But Vlad Tepes, also called the Impaler, Dracula, as we see in so many things, which, of course, what I've always been amused by is that this is one guy that Satanists glob onto every possible thing, that somehow this person was a evil Satanist into passions of the flesh and murder and everything else. Satanists just love to grab onto as the baser ways of operating and think that there's something good about it because they're too weak to do anything of a positive nature, and it don't pay enough for them. So it's always amusing that they somehow grab onto this guy. And the amusing part of Dracula, which is an order and a title given to Vlad Tepes' father, is a high knightly order of a Christian level, because he was a great fighter against the evil Islamic empire, which I'll go into as well. So it's amusing that they would grab onto him, who was a great Christian, a person who put his mouth and his fighting arm behind his beliefs, unlike most Christians who cower in the corner expecting the mythical Jesus-ism to take care of them. Because you remember, it's Jesus-ism, it's not really Christianity, which is two different things, but that's for another audio. So it is very amusing that which is not his name, Dracula, you could call him, that would be a title he had, which is a knightly title. He was a knight in the Dracula order, similar to if you were a Templar, who was a knight in the Christendom. So Very important to understand that. So let's first of all get past all this evil satanic nonsense. He was a great, great warrior, and the preservation of Europe as a non-Islamic invasion, at least parts of it. Islam invaded all areas of Europe and tried to take Europe many times, and failed almost for mysterious reasons. Certainly there was no great effort against them by Europe, who was constantly fighting each other, as is the case as well. Now, there's a lot of historical things that people need to understand once and for all, and nobody seems to know that. There's all sorts of urban legends going around, gossip, and this has to be handled. And one of them, of course, is this ridiculousness about Dracula being a Satanist and other things. How much of what he did was dramatized and made further? Well, I don't consider anything he did uncalled for the fact that his entire country was being taken over by an evil, hostile group of people who stole their children, made them into homosexual, murderous slaves, that this is an uncalled for thing. That his family, his father, and I believe, I'm not sure if it was a cousin or an additional brother, were horribly tortured and murdered. I believe even buried alive. Kind of changes your attitude when you get into battle, and certainly erases any lines, if there is lines, which is a fantasy. The fantasy of some sort of chivalry perpetrated in a lot of bad Hollywood movies, especially about World War I, is complete nonsense. So the whole idea is that this was a great, great man who saved the world from the Muslim Empire, otherwise known as Turkey, which was taken by the Muslims. They murdered all the Christian inhabitants of what was considered the, quote, Rome of its time, otherwise known as not Constantinople. That is a hostile, illegal occupation of what the Islamic world has done to Turkey and continues to do to Turkey with the support of their brothers in arms, otherwise known as the Deutsche, or the Germans, who are basically Arabs. And they love their Arab-Turkish brothers. So this has to be understood, and the so-called, of course, there was no Germany until 1879 or whenever, when finally Napoleon was beat, and then they attacked the French, who basically owned what is considered Germania, which is a title given by the Romans of that particular area, not of a country. It's a bad terminology, and even modern Germans of today don't call themselves Germany. They call themselves Deutschland, which is an Islamic or Arabic word meaning people, or Deutschland, people land. So this is an old Arabic word, Sanskrit, whatever you want to go into. That's where it comes from, because that's where the Germans come from, so-called Germans. So there was none of those, but there were groups and tribes, and all of Europe is a tribe like anything else. As an American, we understand tribes as these different Native Americans, Apaches, Iroquois, whatever you want, which isn't even really their real names, similar to what the real names in Egypt were. The gods that we know, Ra, all these. Well, it's not the real Egyptian names, that's a Greek name. There is no name for the pyramids. Pyramid is a Greek term, and the pyramid was named that because it looked like a Greek cake that has a similar physical appearance. Isn't that interesting? More disinformation, but you need to know this if you're going to be enlightened, people. You need to know the truth, which should stimulate you to seek truth and give up all the garbage that's in your head. So what happened with him is that at the time, which is now Romania, and he was a Romanian prince who was the only one willing to fight the Islamic invasion there. Now, the countries around it and all the rest of the people, including Hungary and other places, worked against him. Very typical of so-called Jesus-ism people, pseudo-Christians, who worked against those that were on their own team. And this goes on and on again. And of course, the complete and total hiding of the fact that Islam, who took all of Spain and held it for 800 years, who attacked and tried to take over Vienna on 2 or 3 different occasions, one of them being 9/11, and was repulsed by a much lesser degree of military, because at the time the French again, or the Franks, from Germania, were mad at the Viennese. And of course, there was the Viennese tribe, there was the Bavarian tribe, there's all these tribes, and they're exactly the same. To illustrate this further, in England, there's the Scottish tribe, there's the Welsh tribe. And what have the English been doing to the Scots and the Welsh? Well, they've been fighting them. Then there's the Irish tribe, which to this day the Brits continue, the English in particular, to fight the Irish, as they've been fighting them for 800 years and won't give up a little sliver of land that has no business being theirs. Something ought to know about. Northern Ireland is Northern Ireland. It is not part of England, and they need to get the hell out of there, these scone-eating little freaks they are. So the whole idea is that we need to understand that. So the tribe, or the Irish tribe, is being attacked by the English tribe yet again. It's amazing they took out time in 2 world wars to stop fighting each other and go after other people for the time being, and of course then further embraced them, as the Queen of England is German. Isn't that interesting? That ought to tell you a lot. So, as we go on with all these things, we need to fully understand, and first of all, when you're fighting for your survival of your entire country, and the great man that Vlad Tepes was, who executed a bunch of worthless, wealthy people in his own country that betrayed their own country, and fought against a horrible, invading, disgusting group of people otherwise known as the Muslims, who butchered and murdered people and continued to do that, as the Turks murdered on one of their many murder sprees of 1.5 million Armenians about 100 years ago. Well, let's forget. After they seized an entire country of Constantinople, otherwise known as Byzantium, and murdered millions of people to do that, including murdering millions of Christians in their huge church that they like to take credit for, as they have done now in Jerusalem, where they occupy the Solomon's Temple and everything else, when Islam is 500 years younger than Christianity. So that's pretty ridiculous, but it's tolerated by a weak world. But of course, the world has always been working under this Islamic threat since its invention by the murderous, child-molesting leader of that church, otherwise known as Muhammad, who has been verified to have married a girl of 6 years old and consummated the relationship at 8. That's the kind of things you get from the Muslims, which goes on to this day. He also thought it was perfectly fine to enslave and murder everybody else and to keep sex slaves, and this was all perfectly fine as long as they weren't of his little clan. And it goes on and on, including the great murder they are. So we can see this kind of attitude perpetrating into the 21st century, which is what's going on in the Middle East right now. Not that anybody else is all that much better, but there's different levels of scum, and certainly they are at the bottom. So as we move into this understanding here, now these are people that came and demanded, and part of the people who were turned over to the Islam, the Turkey Islam, which really people want to somehow think that Turkey is not Islamic. What a joke. But they would demand and go into these countries and demand hundreds and thousands of children be turned over to them. The first thing they would do with these children, as part of their perverse and very typical Islamic homosexual practices, which is part of Islam and supported by their holding of hands, their kissing each other, like George Bush did with the Saudi Arabian prince, Bush, the German. So the whole idea is that we can fully understand what's going on here if you know the culture. So they would kidnap, and the first thing they would do would massively rape every one of these children and do it consistently every day to condition them. Separated from their families, they would then train them in military arts to be mass murdering psychotics. These were called the Janissaries. Have you ever heard of these people? Well, the Janissaries is exactly what it is. But of course, that's all covered up. It's only the big bad crusaders that went to the place that they owned and fought for it. But, they didn't own it like some little some Arab tribe owned certain spots, and that is just not true at all. Here again, Christian Jerusalem was established 500 years before the mythical Mohammed and his fake ascension nonsense. Not to mention the Jews were there 2,000 years before the Christians, as Judaism goes back approximately 4,000 years, maybe even a little more in a more scattered belief system. So, this is all facts that everyone should be fully aware of. So Bram Stoker took this information, of course, the Janissaries. So this is what. So Dracula, or Vlad Tepes, was part of these children who was taken and raped, and his brother, who apparently was, his father was blackmailed. You had to do this or they invade your country. What are you supposed to do? It's a difficult situation. Everybody wants to think they're heroes, and would fight against such things. Yet in life, I found nothing but horrible cowards that won't fight for anything. So the whole idea is they turned over their children. Basically, they had no choice. One of these was Vlad Tepes and his brother, who apparently was an attractive little boy. So he was more fucked and molested than others. So Vlad, who apparently wasn't all that attractive, only got it every once in a while. But this is what he was subjected for many, many years to, and eventually was put into their army and was able to then, over time, get out of that situation and fight against his oppressors when he was able to, while his brother, apparently enjoying the kind of contact he got from the Islam and their sausages, apparently, and became a traitor to his own country, etc. So let's get very, very clear of what these are. The Muslims have been known for their atrocities, their sexual abuse and murder. This is carried on into all of the practices of the, quote, Prussian Germans of that time, who were known for their barbarity and so forth. Now, you've got to remember that the so-called Deutschlanders all come from the Middle East. They are Arabs. This is very well illustrated even in the modern 20th century when people like the psychotic Himmler, who was responsible for murdering at least 10 million people. The figures you get are German statistics, and they're all wrong. Probably the figures are closer to 20 million of their own civilians or other civilians. They also, the Nazi SS, had at least 10 to 20 divisions of highly decorated Islamic soldiers in the SS. They murdered 10 million of their own people, basically to steal their assets, demonizing the so-called Jews, who were the smart ones, who were successful. And who else are you going to get rid of if you're a dumb, stupid, ignorant Arab? You're going to get rid of the people who have money so you can take it, and you don't want to have the smart people running anything. You want your dumb Arabs to run it, otherwise known as your typical German. So the whole idea is that you have this reality that few people understand. Now, the accounts of Dracula were written all by these because there was no Germany or Deutschland. Again, they're just tribes pissing and shitting on each other like the Germans so love to do in their sexual practices. Written by them who were against it because they were involved as supporters and making heavy amounts of money, as they are today, from their Turkish cousins. Himmler, of course, when he found out that he was nothing more than an Arab, went around stealing every possible white baby he could find through Europe. And, of course, in general, the German tribes, who have lost every battle they've ever been in, have been integrated by other people who have given them some sort of different social and look. But your average German, if you look at them, looks like an Iranian where they come from. They have all the features and everything else mixed with that. Now, the fact is that blue eyes are throughout all of Europe, from Romania to Russia, so it's not a, quote, Germanic thing. Now, the term Aryan comes from Indo-European, meaning the migration of people from the Middle East into India. So the technical background of these so-called tribes that settled in what's now considered by Westerners as Germany came from the Middle East through India and then settled into that area. So that's really, which is amusing with people that want to, quote, call themselves white people. Well, they didn't call themselves white people. They didn't use the word white power. They used the word Aryan, which is another Indo-African, I should say Indo-Arab word. And if you listen to German and the way they push all their words together, it's identical to Arabic. The cadence, the overpronunciation, it's exactly like Arabic languages. So we need to fully understand that because it plays an important role in this particular. So Bram Stoker, so the writings that were there, because they were trading with the Muslims, making lots and lots of money from them, wrote about this terrible guy who was interrupting their business and hurting their cousins. So they wrote all these terrible stories about him. I'm not sure any of those stories are very terrible. He was highly outnumbered, had no support from his so-called other Christians, or Jesus-ism people, particularly the Hungarians, who are well known to be Nazi sympathizers and consider themselves Nazis to this day, are all problems to this issue and would not go and support him. So he either could be like the average Christian of today and run with his tail between his legs, or he could stand up and fight with everything he could possibly do. And if you think that the world is less brutal, or anything that he actually did was less brutal than we do today, well, I think that's a very ignorant way of looking at things. And considering how many people in this day and age, even in the 20th and 21st century, are tortured and murdered in prisons, and I'm not talking about in some Middle Eastern prison, we're talking about in general in American prisons today. People are murdered there all the time at every level because this is the barbarity and getting rid of people. So the whole idea is that he did what he had to do. Now, it's interesting that crucifixion and impaling were not, of course, things that were unique to the Romans or anybody else. And guess who started that? Well, again, it was the Persian Iranians who used those initial types of executions or torture, whatever you want to call them, which is very interesting. And the other interesting thing, of course, they did find an ancient man in what is considered modern Deutschland, the Heidelberg man, and is tracked directly back to Africa. So technically the first Germans were Africans. That's a scientific fact, as well as everything else. Now, everything else I've stated here can be checked out by third-party sources. It's 100% fact. The fact that you don't know it is a fact of your poor education by your ignoramus teachers, who are stupid, controlled, and basically nothing more than little dictators in their classrooms, that this is how they get off. That's what a teacher is. You need to pull that nonsense out of your consciousness as well. So after his father and other relatives were tortured to death, he was raped, his brother was raped and tortured for many, many years, and he escaped from these typical Muslim practices. He then fought back to save his country, otherwise known as modern Romania. So to put the fear into those invaders, he would impale many, many different subversives and Muslims that he got his hands on, and would put them up as a show that you come here, you're going to get some pretty bad thing. This turned the Muslim hordes away on many occasions. It worked for a period of time. He also learned how to fight, and what you do as a person resisting overwhelming odds, you learn to hit and run as a commando type force and not to get pinned down. This did work for a period of time where he got very little support, even from this title of being this Christian knight, because no one really backed him up. And this is one of the problems with all of the situations. This is why the Crusades didn't turn out. It had nothing to do with fighting. Basically, the Muslims were pretty easy to beat. They were poorly armed, poorly trained, and they just had numbers. But to support any military action, you need lots and lots of money. And this could not be sustained. So as that couldn't be sustained, large groups of soldiers left the Middle East, leaving it in a weak position. We also understand of poor leadership and conditions that happened to accelerate this process, supposedly, and by a very bad leader, apparently, of the Knights Templar, and at the Battle of Hattin, who they exposed their troops without water in 120-degree temperatures in the summertime, when people didn't normally fight, that somebody decided to go out and do that, and the King of Jerusalem's listened to, apparently, what was. And, of course, I haven't looked into all the facts of that. So this is the story we have as an urban myth, that the Knight Templar, the head of the order at that time, just wanted to get into a fight and didn't care about anything else, including the fact of having water in 120-degree temperature. And anybody who's been in that, and I've lived in those temperatures for many years of my life, understand that without water, you are in very serious trouble. So, we need to fully understand that and understand all the facts of things. So, he was in no way a blood drinker, all these types of things that Bram Stoker and everyone else talked about. He was defending his country. He was a great man. He defended and prevented Europe from basically being taken over. His stopping of the Muslims for a period of time stopped the major push into areas. He was able to keep troops active for a period of time, gives the other cowardice Christians around him time to fortify themselves to some degree. And his steps of impaling people and then using, he would send people who were sick with all sorts of diseases and other things. He would use them as biological warfare, and of course this would scare troops and everything else. This is what you do. You're fighting for your survival. Now, a lot of people, I guess, could not understand that in this day and age, since it's the cowardice race of people that seem to populate this earth, and not willing to fight for anything in life, that they're just ready to be corrupt along with their corrupt leaders, police, and military. So the whole idea is all this is complete nonsense, and making him out that he had some psychic powers and that he can manipulate women and all the things that we see in these bad movies, and had some super abilities. Well, if you consider super abilities swinging your sword well and being a fantastic tactician, then you have a superhuman person. He certainly did not have any of these fantasy things. He was a devout Christian that put his neck on the line, while Christians today don't do any fighting. They're cowards. They work for the system and are as corrupt as the system itself. The disgrace that has been done to Vlad, Dracula Vlad, the disgrace that has been trying to done to the Knights Templar, is a serious evil that needs to be countered. Satanists like to claim these people, who are nothing more than great Christians, pure Christians, as the Templars were, as being gnosis-seeking Christians and not believing in silly Jesusism. And Vlad was, to a similar extent, a Gnostic Christian. So, as we understand all these things, we must understand that what is done there. So there's nothing here done. He did some brutality to the worthless upper class Romanians at that time who refused to support him properly, who didn't stand up for their country, who didn't stand up for his father who was ruling at that time when he was brutally tortured and murdered. So he took a proper justice stand against cowardless, worthless people within their country and eliminated them, had them work to death or had them do projects, so forth. So that's running a country properly, and that's what everyone has done throughout time to those subversives and bad people within their society as a way of disposing of them. It is a cruel but necessary fact of life. So we need to fully understand all that with what is happening here, and we need to understand that entire story. Now, the Bram Stoker story was a novel. It was loosely based on a person where he picked from history, reading the German accounts of him, which painted him as a horrible, torturous murderer when he was nothing more than defending Christendom. That, of course, the fake Muslims, or I should say the fake Christians, who are actually Muslims, otherwise known as the Germans, who to this day follow some bizarre Christianity that isn't, which is laughable, needs to be fully understood. So, but I'm not sure, and since there's very little that I can find on what his opinions of this particular, this novel that he wrote, was a horror novel. It was not a historical account. It wasn't even one of these historically based fiction novels, which are so popular in recent years. So it really wasn't based on all of that. He just took a weird character, someone who was thought to be brutal, and there were, again, these lying accounts of him drinking blood and other things. Well, he extrapolated on these things like so many people do, and created this character, otherwise known as Dracula, which again is a distortion of a title. Dracula was a knightly order, as I've said. He was a knight of the Dracula order, which was a Christian order. So, it's to distort those kind of things, and I guess it didn't matter at his time, and after all, it was a novel. So, I'm always amazed at really how stupid most dark magic, left-hand path Satanists are. They have no understanding and background of what they're doing whatsoever. They've done no research whatsoever. They're all goofy idiots. And to take on this person and call it their own based on this person who is high. And these same stupid idiot Christians, fake Christians, have done the same thing with the Knights Templar, thanks to that Satanist, Aleister Crowley, who claimed that the Knights Templar, for his own personal benefit, because it fitted in with his reality, were somehow Satanists. And it's amazing that people who have the courage and the belief to put their life on the line for something are claimed by these scumbucket, corrupt Satanists that run this world and who act like Christians, like politicians and other people, while they're molesting children and doing all their perverse acts of satanic practices, want to claim all the good people. Isn't that amazing? And not only are these people that are just not leaders, they're not claiming the Pope, the worthless scumbucket that every one of those have been. They want to claim the warriors for those that have strong belief systems, not mouthed from a church preaching position about what should be done and how to live, while they go back and molest and live in their homosexual cult. But these are people that put their life on the line. And that is very important that everyone understand that this person fought for his country and did what he could for his country and for his Christian beliefs like few others around this world have ever done. And he is the savior of Europe, because if it wasn't for him standing in the way, Europe would have been taken. As I mentioned, A lot of Europe was taken. Northern parts of northern Italy, all of Spain was taken by the Muslims by force and occupied for hundreds of years until Queen Elizabeth of Spain finally kicked them out. This is why we have this entire problem that we have throughout the entire world of people's basic racial appearance. The Spanish did not have what we consider that Latin skin. That came from the Muslim forced interbreeding. And that includes Portugal, other places, including places which have been under pressure by these people. Greece has been taken over, who was one of the, you could call, quote, one of the places where the white races started from, if you want to use that terminology. Sounds terrible. Italy, which of course, and the Etruscans, which are the original white race. They even have a language that is not similar to any other language because they were the original white tribe from Atlantis who settled there and in different parts of Greece and Italy in general, and other places and the Celtic tribes, etc., which were all, quote, white, if you want to call it that. While the so-called Aryan or Caucasian from the Caucasus Mountains, otherwise known as the Middle East, where these other people came from. So, we can look at the record of these people, the murderous record that anyone connected to the Middle East directly has. The murderous record of tens of millions of people murdered in recent times in the 19th and 20th century by the Turks and by their allied cousins, the Germans, who go back as being Prussians and other ones that were known nothing except for their torture, murder, and rape. Even in the American Revolution, part of the Constitution and talked about how these, quote, Prussians needed to be executed and handled in a particular fashion because all they did was murder and rape, and this is not part of modern warfare. Well, it is if you're a Muslim, and they always have done this, and they always will. It's part of their tradition, and people need to understand that. So, these are the facts that people don't look at. And to further of these problems, we've seen what happened as these murderous cults are moving into the 20th century. You got to remember that the Turkish were allies of Germany in World War I directly, and they were in World War II as well, supplying them with metals and other things, even though they, quote, were neutral. These are one of the other farcical things, just like Spain was supposedly neutral when they were supplying with all sorts of material and men to the Nazis, and continued that fascism up until the 70s, until Franco was finally kicked out, Hitler's buddy. So as we move through the, we need to fully understand what's going on in these areas. And it is interesting that Spain was part of this brutal dictatorship. And where does their history go back for hundreds and hundreds of years? It goes back to Islam again. Now, these are facts, people. I mean, we can't sit there and ignore cultures that are directly hooked up to massacres and murders historically for thousands of years. And the dictatorship in Europe are all linked to the Muslims. And all of them are linked together. Romania, which turned into this dictatorship as time went on and the influx of more Muslim energies, guess who they were allies with? Well, they were allies with the Germans in World War. People think that it was just Germany there when they had Spain helping them, they had Turkey helping them, Romania helping them. Italy was on their side in a forced position, even though they murdered massive amounts of Italians and executed them. Tried to steal or murder all the Italian Jews, which the Italians stopped them from doing. Only a tiny percentage of the Jews were ever captured because the Italians took action against that. So, I mean, again, these these are facts. So we need to look at these countries and look at their connections to understand where all this is happening, particularly in Europe of today. So this distortion, which came from these written documents, which came from at the time there, what were considered these Germanian tribes, because there wasn't a Germany until 1870, 90, I forget it was, when that war was fought with France to unite the German tribes in that particular area. There never was the ignorance of people saying, well, Germany doesn't go back 2,000 years. It doesn't go back. They don't have any history whatsoever. They're tribes. And even to this day, you have the northern, southern, middle Germans, and they even speak a lot of different languages and use different words in their original Arabic tongue. So all of this is people need to fully understand of what's going on. So he fought and ultimately was able to do amazing things to save Europe from the Muslim hordes, and paid for it with his life. Certainly didn't have a great life, but when your family is murdered, when you're raped and tortured for years, when they rape and torture your brother who becomes a traitor, well, these are motivations that takes off the fake shine of what's called chivalry. This whole chivalry, or acting in a particular way in war, which was perpetrated by bad Hollywood films, particularly about World War I, and about the Red Baron and all this bullshit of how people, complete and total nonsense. There certainly wasn't any chivalry there. People didn't respect each other. It was the Germans in World War I that invented mustard gas, which took war from killing a few hundred to killing thousands and thousands with a smile on their face. The wife of the German inventor of mustard gas, I guess, was a good enough person. She committed suicide because he refused to stop the massive chivalrous weapon that he invented. Facts, people, learn the facts. So I hope everybody knows who this great knight of Dracula was, the great impaler who took steps that he needed to save his country, who fought and died for his belief systems like the Knights Templar did, and other Christians who went out and actually to a hostile, terrible land that offered them nothing. They didn't make a penny off of that. It's all the nonsense that you've been told lies about, that something was gone there and there were benefits for money and so forth, to go sit in 120-degree heat, go to a foreign land, and have nothing but a desert around you to grow crops. Well, of course, we know the Jews are able to do that because of their more European mentality. If people are in that delusional state, then you need to do a lot of reading, and you need to stop being brainwashed by these hypocritical liars, these paid disinformation agents by the Black Lodge that feed you a whole bunch of lies that can easily be found out by doing your own personal research. As I tell everyone, don't believe anything I say. Go out and read it for yourself. Virtually nothing of what I've ever stated in all my lectures cannot be verified. They're all verified. They're verified by third parties that I have no contact with, nothing. It is fact, and there's no way to argue with facts that come from others as well. The history of Dracula in particular is documented in many, many books out there, fictionalized books, as I've talked about, even that are historical fiction. You can find these on Amazon, on Kindle, and you can find them in used bookstores inexpensively. If you want to read about what actually happened there, then you should do that. But it's amazing how some of these books even continue to criticize this guy's activities when we know that they were written by his enemies and that the accounts of what he did are highly exaggerated. This is complete. Everything that you know is highly exaggerated. And you have to dig around and find credible authors who have went past that and take out what is public opinion. It's amazing how people to this day want to stick with figures and even say, well, these figures are not right with the execution of the amount of murders that were done in Nazi Germany. And to think that that figure is 6 million people is a very typical Germanic lie, which they lie with everything they've ever done since the inception of their country. So the whole idea is that to think that those figures are even close, as I stated, could be more likely is at least 10 and probably 20 million that have been executed in their own country, because they shot everybody, including 14-year-old girls who jumped off of gun turrets in the middle of the night who were scared during bombing raids. So they shot them in the head like the good Deutsches they are. So the whole idea is that this kind of mass execution is the only way they held together their pathetic Arabic society. So we need to understand that, and you do that through massive terror. And being the typical German incompetence with 38 attempts on Hitler, not one of them being successful, shows you the kind of coordination you're going to get from the Germans, not to mention the cowardice they are. The great Rommel, who lost his entire African corps of 150,000 men, were captured by Montgomery without the assistance of the Nazi Patton. So the whole idea, all of this stuff is facts, and people need to look at these facts and understand them fully and understand what's going on and what's real out there and not what fake people tell you about the Crusades, about Dracula, in a bunch of serialized novels on top of it. It's not anything that they show is based on anything reality. It's all fiction based. It's horror writing and nothing more. Certainly, Vlad was not or did not have any supernatural abilities. War and its brutality, to judge what is more than others, killing 10,000 people at a time with a gas, is not brutal. Impaling is more brutal. Well, what people don't quite understand is whether you're shot in the head with a bullet, even if that's a BB or a .22 caliber, you're still dead. And whether that was an atomic bomb, mustard gas, or anything else, once you're dead, it really doesn't have a very judgmental or measurable extreme to it. You're dead. So hopefully this has brought your attention to a very important area with a lot of history and something that I think people have an interest in, and you should read some of this literature and see what this real story is there. I mean, Dracula is so much of our pop culture here, and like so many things, was not really meant to be taken as a historical basis or to give a good or bad attitude to that particular person. But Bram Stoker, an Irishman, probably a radical, again, Christian, Roman Catholic Christian, I'm assuming. I haven't done research on his religion, but what Irishman isn't Roman Catholic, to attack one of his own people that saved the entire Europe, including that little island of Ireland, where he was originally from the Muslims who would murder, enslave, and rape them and turn them into homosexual play toys, is an insult to his religion, himself, and his credibility as a man. So, as with everything, people, get the facts, seek truth, and everything turns out fine.